friends. Welcome to Snap Take. This is Glazer of Snap Judgments, the official podcast of Marvel Snap Zone. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, do we have an update. We have quite the patch. It's going to shake up the meta. We've got new things. We've got changes. We've got to rebuild some decks. We've got all that for you, including multiple updates to the game. Let's go. I'm not going to leave you waiting. You can see 3 of the cards that were changed. Although, I guess Thanos wasn't changed, the stone was changed. You get it. All right, this is all the changes. Huge thanks, as always, to the wonderful Carolus for the infographic. We're going to go over just what all these are with a quick one-sentence summary for those of you who are short on time. Then we're going to go into all the implications for each of these cards in detail. We're going to go through all the changes that aren't card-related updates, and then we're going to do decks as well for each of the cards that changed. I've got more than one deck, or at least one deck for every single card. All right, so Elsa is now a 3/3 with her original text. When you fill a location, the card gets +2 power. She's going back to her original functionality. She wasn't seeing a lot of play at that point when she was changed from +3 to +2, but that's because Werewolf was insane. I would betcha at +3, giving that +2 power anywhere on the board, she's going to be really, really strong and so very much less predictable in how you use her. I think she's going to be great. Miek still gets +1 power for card discarded, but the next turn, he doesn't move automatically. The next turn, he basically gets Nightcrawler. He becomes Nightcrawler for a turn. So the turn after you discard, as long as Miek's on the board, he gets power for however many cards discarded, and you get to choose where he moves. This is a ridiculously huge buff. It was semi-accidentally spoiled earlier when they accidentally changed his text without changing his functionality in an earlier update, but I think Miek is going to be legitimately a stellar card. And I think that he might be enough to push discard up to the very edges of tier 1. Mantis changes completely. She's a 2/2. When you play a card at a location, at the same location an opponent plays location, you get a copy of that card in your hand, which means like you'll get a copy if they've played that Venom. You'll get a copy of that Venom with all its buffs. That they made her a 2/2 suggests that when they tested her, she was good. I don't think she's good, but the change in her cost suggests that she's probably good. I can't quite figure out how that is. That might be a Baron Zemo thing next month. It might be a play her on turn 4 and steal one of their powerful 4s type thing. I don't know. Let's see. Cable, because Mantis has now moved away, becomes a 2/3. Same ability, but becomes a 2/3. I think that's really good. Cable used to be better than Mirage and Loki, and I betcha now is a 2/3. He is once more better than Mirage and Loki. I think this is a really, really great update for Cable. I think Cable's a good card in Loki. The Time Stone no longer gives +1 energy. Instead, it gives the next card you draw -1 cost. That can fairly often be a useless card, but it could also be a stone and then you have Hope Summers, or it can be Hope Summers and then you can play a stone. So it can very often end up working as ramp, just as like ramp with more steps. This is very much a nerf for Thanos. But like, how bad of one? Is it enough to not make Thanos the best deck? My bet is no. M'Baku now jumps to the lowest power location, still doesn't jump from hand. It's terrible, maybe even worse. How often is 2 power winning you the lowest powered location, unless it's one you couldn't reach? And if it was one you couldn't reach, right, like if your opponent also couldn't reach it, then he's good, but like, that's a lot of ifs. Yondu now destroys the lowest cost card in an opponent's deck. That's worse for most of the ways I use him. I've been running Ava's Mill deck, so that's not great. He's now like no longer even an option for destroy decks. So he's a card that exists. Again, I think what they're doing is they're setting up Baron Zemo with this. Baron Zemo is a 4/6 that puts the lowest cost card in your opponent's deck in play on your side. So if you can play Yondu first, you can get rid of the lowest, and then when you play Zemo, you're more likely to get something bigger. I guess there's some upside to that. And then finally we have Leech. Leech is now an on reveal, and its ability is remove the text of everything that has an on reveal. So it's going to blank only on reveal cards. Most of the time when Leech is used offensively, that still means it works. It's still going to, like, generally speaking, all of the cards that change locations, for example, are on reveal cards, so it still has that use for High Evolutionary, but it's no longer like this just aggressive, I can snap Leech and then you can't do anything card, where it was that before, right? Still really good against like hammers. It's still good against a lot of stuff. I think people are going to stop playing it and slowly realize that it's still pretty damn good, but let's find out. All right, we've also got some big changes. First, we've got a graveyard finally for destroyed and discarded cards. What you do is you click on your profile and you can see what you destroyed or discarded, and then you click on the opponent's profile and you can see what they destroyed or discarded. Amazing. You'll love to see it. This is going to change how mobile is played. It really, really does offer a lot, especially because like a lot of times I miss things. Sorry, like I'll be like Spider-Ham and then someone will talk to me and I'm like, I miss it. Well, I guess that won't be solved, right? But if I ever decide to play Yondu, at least I'll know that. All right, we've got the undo end turn button finally, which is amazing. If it doesn't completely fix everything, because if your opponent snaps, you'll still have to press undo in that little time you have to respond to the snap, right? So it's not ideal, but it is better. So undo end turn is better, and I like that improvement. We have rarity change, less selectable border. We'll see exactly how much this means. But hey, being able to just randomly set everything to gold is going to make my life easier. So props for that. We've got a gold pass, which seems to be about $5 for 1,800 gold, which is way, way, way more value than you get for $5 in the gold shop. It's reasonably good value if you plan to use gold, if they ever release good gold bundles again, and I think they're gonna release a good gold bundle or two because of this gold pass, then we'll be doing good. And remember, if you're interested in gold bundles, we review gold bundles every time they come up on, well, we review all bundles whenever they come up on this channel in the video the next day. Locations always resolve left to right. That consistency saves me so much mental energy. I have like 18 stupid location interactions stored in the back of my head that I've now started to erase. And Subterraneous changed to 4 rocks. Huge props. Finally, a bunch of locations are rare. That's the next slide. We're going to talk about each of those individually, and then we'll get to the specific cards. So we've got Camp Lehigh. Camp Lehigh is the one that puts a 3 in your hand. That is now rare. I don't think I like that. I understand why they did it. Sometimes that 3 was incredibly powerful. Sometimes that 3 was incredibly useless. Fine, I guess, but I didn't think Camp Lehigh was a problem. I'm relatively happy to see Collapsed Mine go away, largely because Destroy is a deck and Free Death immediately is obnoxious. I like the shenanigans with Collapsed Mine an awful lot. The things where like you can play an armor there, or you can change, if your opponent doesn't skip, you can change the location so that they get stuck. Or if they do get stuck, then they can play like a Space Stone or a Cloak or whatever and pull a card out of there, or a Killmonger or whatever. I like all of that nonsense. All of those shenanigans are here for me. I just didn't like the death interaction. The Great Portal is the one that I believe copies the highest cost card in opponent's hand. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it does. Again, I'm fine with that going away. I don't know. It's just kind of nonsensey. Hotel Inferno, I think, was totally fine. I'm actually sad to see Hotel Inferno gone. That's the one where if you play cards on it, the turn it reveals, it destroys the top card of your opponent's deck. It was variance, but it was variance that sometimes you want to take advantage of and sometimes you didn't. I liked it. Shuri's Lab being rare is great. We're about to see with the Elsa buff a lot more Kitty Pryde. Kitty Pryde and Destroy are both completely freaking broken with Shuri's Lab, and not having to deal with that nonsense as often is good. Lamentus 1 is a junk location. That could be, however rare they made it, it could be rare. I think Nord Dimension is really fun in skill testing, but I get why it's gone. I like, not gone, less common. I liked it fairly common. I also like Rickety Bridge common. I think Rickety Bridge is a very skill testing location, and I like its existence. I understand that several of these, Lamentus, Collapsed Mine, Rickety Bridge, are meant to make Destroy weaker. We have the Superflow rare. That's lame. Superflow is a really cool location. The Abbey rare. That's lame. The Abbey is a really cool location. And Valley of the Hand rare. And I don't have any issues with Valley of the Hand, but I get it. Again, we're doing things to destroy. So Rickety Bridge, Superflow, and the Abbey, and Hotel Inferno, I'm sad about. The rest I'm neutral to happy about. Cool. All right. First, Time Stone now makes a card cost 1 less. That is our change to Thanos, our latest attempt to nerf the unnerfable Mad Titan. I think this is still going to make the card unnerfable. This is going to make the Professor X versions that dominated Worlds worse. We just had the World Championship, which was dominated by Professor X Thanos, which thrives on Time Stone, and Psylocke is getting harder and harder to fit, largely because they keep releasing cards like Mockingbird, so Professor X is harder and harder to use. Professor X still might be a necessity, so it might be worth still running Psylocke. We're going to have to see. All right. Any Thanos going with a bunch of 5s is going to have a problem. I think you're limited. Excuse me. Because of this change to 2 5s, you want to go heavier on 6s because you're going to rely more on Hope Summers. If you play Hope on 3, then a card on Hope or more cards on Hope on 4, you are now active to drop 6s, which makes Thanos a heavier 6 deck than a 5 deck. And since we have Kyra, I can easily see that becoming a problem down the line, should they release good enough 6s or buff 6s enough. Also, this Time Stone is better with Hope in particular. If you play that Time Stone and have Hope, you have a good chance of that Time Stone, 5 chances of that Time Stone hitting another Infinity Stone. If it does, that stone will cost 0, and that's Hope plus a 0 for extra energy. That seems like it's probably good. This is another reason Mobius should be everywhere. Some Thanos is still running Scar. Mobius should be everywhere. Mockingbird is brand new. Came out around this time. So that means that Mobius should be everywhere. Now Time Stone, which is one of the most important cards in Thanos, Mobius should be everywhere. This probably isn't going to make Thanos not the best deck, but it's going to make Thanos worse and allow things to catch up and be more competitive with it. Alright, the first deck we're going to talk about here is Komi's deck. This is the deck that won Worlds. It's Komi's and .geo's deck. The number 1 and number 3 player in the World Championships played the same deck. They're Italian from the same Meta Brothers. This is that deck. Is this worse? Yes. Is this worse enough to actually bother to change a card and not think it's the best deck? Nope. They need to do more to Thanos, but I'm happy they're trying. I look forward to their next attempt to make Thanos not the dominant thing to do in Marvel Snap. We also have Naka Thanos. This is a more traditional Thanos. I think that this version is likely hurt more, right? Because this version is fine. You'll be okay. I think this version is likely hurt a little bit more. You have more hits that you just don't like. Although, like, look, sometimes the Time Stone's going to make that Devil Dino Revision 4. Sometimes it's going to make that Cull 3 and you're going to be happy, right? Honestly, a 3-cost shrunk, maybe it's not that much worse. If you can make some of these cards cheaper, you end up with a cheaper Scar, and that has a lot of power. You have Mobius in the deck. I think this is ultimately fine. I think Thanos is fine. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't think this is enough. I think Thanos needs something legitimately serious to happen to him for him to not be the best thing to do. I think they released too many good Thanos cards for like 3 months in a row, and we just hit critical mass of really good stuff to do in that build. Next up, we have Elsa, who's a 3/3 that gives +2 whenever any location is filled. I told y'all I expected her to get the exact same update as Luke Cage, and so eventually she did. She didn't get the +1 power, thankfully, because a 3/4 Elsa seems a little silly. Alright, so she's already had a resurgence in the Silky Move Hope decks. I think she still goes in them. A lot of people are like, but it messes up the curve, and to some extent it does, except what Hope does is give extra energy so you can still figure it out. It also, that she works in other locations means that you don't have to like risk goblins and such in that Hope lane nearly as much, which is pretty damn good. Where else can she go now besides that deck? Does she go into Bounce, Thanos, Zeus, Surfer, or Loki? Well, we've got multiple decks for each of those to take a look at. So we're going to begin with Desmond's Silky Smooth. This is the winningest Silk deck still to this day. It's the one we featured, and everyone yelled at me that there were better versions out there. This is the Silky Smooth deck that, after a week of play, still has the highest win rate. It's Desmond's list. It's really, really good. Elsa still goes in this just fine. You might note that you have 1 in Angela, 2 in Craven, 3 in Jeff, 4 in Silk, 4 other 2-drops and 2 other 1-drops. You should still be fine on the early terms. Yes, that's 3 3-drops, but since 1 is Hope, I don't think it's a huge problem. You're not actually reducing costs, so Mobius being everywhere doesn't hurt you. This deck got a really, really, really solid boost with this change. This is my edit to Blobby Lashley. That is the version of Thanos used to be Thanos Lockjaw, version of Thanos preferred by Safety Blade. I made some updates to it. Infinity Stones mean you have an early curve, right? So I threw Elsa into the list. Elsa is fundamentally replacing Mobius. I don't think she's better than Mobius right now, but I don't think it's hard to see a meta where she could be. And if she is good in this list, then God, Thanos does not need an extra push. but I can see it. I can see like making all the Infinity Stones 3, making it that much, or many of the Infinity Stones 3, making it that much harder to deal with it. Plus, it already runs Jeff and Vision. Next up, we have Drewberry's Mocking Zoo. This is a zoo list that was running Cull. It was a Cull zoo list. I think Mockingbird is better in the list because we're running Squirrel Girl and Shauna. If we're running Squirrel Girl and Shauna, then Mockingbird is better. We have Kitty, right? So we should be able to fill a lane with Elsa and get that extra power. And that's basically the entire gist of the list. You can go Black Swan early and just dump, and then go Khazar and Blue Marvel. You can go Black Swan on 5 and dump as well. Shauna alone is going to make Mockingbird really cheap, and I think Elsa just has a real chance at and put 2 cards in a lane. So I think if you do that on an empty lane, then Mockingbird's got a real chance of like just completely being silly. Next up, this is a safety blade that he made for Shaw's missions. I think this is actually good. Elsa is now at 3. You don't have a million 2s here, but if you can get Sarah and Hope going, if you go Sarah Hope, you have 7 energy plus -1 to all your stuff. You can and you can get Elsa out earlier. You can fairly easily fill a bunch of lanes with Mysterio, drop Hitmonkey, drop Shaw, drop Surfer, right? Mysterio would be 1, Hitmonkey would be 2, that's 3. Shaw would be 2, Surfer would be 2, and you play it on Hope, so that's exactly the right energy. And then you just have a stupid, crazy amount of power, and you win the game of Marvel Snap. And winning games of Marvel Snap is kind of the goal. I think that this is going to be very fun. If you get Bishop out, if you get Elsa out, you're just adding extra power to that kind of crazy play. And I think this is going to be really cool. Is it going to be consistent enough? Who the hell knows? Time will tell. Next up, we have Avazord's Old Loki. I've got, I think a couple versions of Loki, because this is where I'm really excited to screw around with Elsa. Elsa was really, really good in Loki until she was nerfed, and then Werewolf was really good in Loki, and then Werewolf was nerfed, and now I think it's worth trying Elsa again. So this is an Elsa Loki list. Avazord's has always been one of my favorite Loki lists, no matter what it is. I had Infinite with an Ava Loki list at one point, so I'm a big fan of Ava Lokis. I changed a few of the cards that don't fit anymore, like America Chavez, and said, okay, so if we can just get that Elsa shenanigans going, we should be set. We probably want Jeff here over something, but I couldn't figure out what. Maybe it's just Zabu, and you just say, I'm just going to play Loki on curve, who cares? But whatever it is, this list, it's probably actually Nico. Nico doesn't feel especially important anymore. But you have a bajillion different things you can do to fill lanes to make things nice and big. And as you fill lanes and make things nice and big, you can eventually Loki and then do the same thing with their cards, right? I don't know. This seems really good. It might not be good this week because Mobius is going to be, you got it, everywhere. Check my article on Marvel Snap Zone where I write about why Mobius is so good. But yeah, Mobius is going to be everywhere. Outside of that, this is great. All right, next up we have Miek. This is Mikey. All right. Miek, Mikey is great now. This card is now going to be a discard staple. It goes from a card that you would occasionally run a discard to a card you basically always want to run a discard. Simple enough? All right, now that he can move, as a choice, you can just put him in a location opponents can't deal with and let him sit and not have to worry about him running out. You can use him as a lane filler and change it. You do lose the ability to move him on the last turn, so you need to do something sooner to get him where you want him to go. And now he's vulnerable to Shadow King and nonsense like that. But I think he still goes in every discard deck because the Nightcrawler ability on top of just gaining the power is stellar. Stellar. This is straight up a huge buff. I've got 2 versions. They are 2 cards apart because I think this is where discard lands. The first is ZT4, one of the best discard players in the world. Played in the Snap Fan World Championships, finished 4-2, missed cut on strength of schedule. Played this list. This is where I'm going to start, and this is probably the list I'm going to start with exactly. This is basically the standard discard. It's running Silver Samurai instead of Colleen Wing. Outside of that, this is where discard lives now. Miek goes in every version of this that you can think of. It is hard for me to foresee a version of this list that would not want to run Miek right now. Yeah, this is just really strong. Morbius and Collector add a lot of power, and they add a lot of power on top of Proxima just being free extra power. This deck gets a ton of free power. Now it gets Morbius, Collector, and Miek power. Free swarms. Dracula becomes stupid huge. Proxima Midnight is free power, free energy. Occasional bomb cards from Helicarrier. you go to town with this list. This is awesome. You also have a standard discard. This is my attempt to make the like bog standard version of the list. What else did I cut besides? I added Colleen and I added Dokken for something. I don't know what I added Dokken for. Whatever. I added Dokken and Colleen and Dokken. I think this is just another good version. A little more tempo oriented, a little more straightforward. I personally prefer the ZT4 list, but I wanted to give you a standard option. Miek, again, is now a mandatory discard card. Luckily, he's a Series 4 card too, so you should be able to afford him if you really need to. Unlike Hercules, who's now mandatory for move, but is much harder to get. Next up, we have Cable, who's just a 2/3 now. This is an upgrade. I think Cable as a 2/3 is just better than Cable as a 3/4. 2 is way easier to play, and getting this ability early is better. He almost certainly goes back in Loki decks, where he's again better than Mirage. He was better than Mirage last time he cost 2, and he was a 2/2. Mirage hasn't changed. Now he's a 2/3, so he's still better than Mirage. Ava had that mill deck he's already in, so we're going to try that. And next month, we can try a Baron Zemo deck with him, because Baron Zemo pulling a card out of their hand, pulling multiple cards out of their deck should be really good. You can do something like Yondu into him, into Gladiator, into Zemo, and now you've removed 4 cards from their deck on curve. That seems good. All right, so Loki, this is Owie made this, but it's Desmond's list. Desmond is, again, brilliant. You can check out, I want to say it's Desmond Korea is his YouTube. He's great and builds some of the best decks in the game. Remember, Cable is a 2/3 now, not a 3/4, so the curve on this deck is better than it was. And other than that, this is just like your standard-ass Loki list. It says, I'm going to stop you by doing things that are powerful, right? I'm going to take your cards and play them better than you can. I'm going to Cosmo a lane when you need that. I'm going to rogue your key ongoing cards. I'm going to Shang whatever big you do. I have an answer for anything you want to do, and then I can just play your cards better than you. That seems good. I like this list. Here's another version. They are not very different. This is, I've spent a lot of time looking for versions of this to end up with 2 that are basically exactly the same. One is running Zabu, one is not, and they should both be running Zabu. This is just a worse version of the previous list. Let's move on. All right, next up we have Yondu, which is, again, destroying that bottom, the lowest cost card in your opponent's deck now, which is usually a nerf, but pretty good with Baron Zemo, and Baron Zemo comes out. He no longer goes in destroy lists because, like, while getting rid of a card for death is good, the other upside was that he was giving your null a decent amount of power, and if he's not doing that, he goes. He could be a weird sort of like tech card. I mean, like, he gets rid of Shadow King reasonably, he gets rid of Armor reasonably, he gets rid of, like, Zabu reasonably often, and I think that has some value. They're going to draw into their other stuff, but if they don't have their enablers or their other stuff, I don't know, I guess there's some value here. His change really hurts that cool Ava Mill deck, which makes me very sad. We're going to look at that deck in a minute, and next month, that Zemo deck, we'll use him. All right, so this is the Ava Mill deck I keep referring to. It's running Cable and who's now again a 2/3, and Yondu and Gladiator, and if it can Yondu, it could Yondu on a Wong, and then absorbing on that, which it could do with Zabu just on turn 4 fairly often. You would get a really cheap death and a really big null. I don't think you get the really big null anymore, at least reliably, which is really sad. And then you screw up their hand with Spider-Ham and Dr. Octopus and so on. And then if you Dr. Octopus wrong, you Shang-Chi, and like there's a whole bunch of really awesome shenanigans for this list. It is one of the most fun decks in Marvel Snap. It is worse than it was, and I don't think it really works. But you can do the same basic deck with Baron Zemo in that null place and probably be fine. The curve here again just makes sense now. You can go Yondu into Cable, you can go Yondu into Zabu, into Wong, and then you can do things like Cable, you can Cable, Gladiator, you can Zemo and get 2 of their cards, and then you can Absorbing Man elsewhere and get another one, and then you've just played like 3 cards out of their deck. Shenanigans such as that seem at least worth playing. I'm hopeful that this is more interesting and powerful than it looks. Again, I think the death package might go, but I didn't know what else to put in. This is a good start, though. Next up, we have M'Baku. M'Baku, again, now jumps to the lowest power location. Still doesn't work from hand like Angel. crazy that we're still waiting for that change, which has not happened. 2 power is not likely to win your lowest power location. It's going to win that lowest power location like occasionally, but most of the time it's just not going to do that. Especially in cards and locations like Sanctum Sanctorum. But odds are your opponent has a Jeff and he doesn't beat a Jeff. But if you draw him, he doesn't even do that. And if you don't draw him and Bar with No Name happens, he loses you the game. But he has serious Cerebro 2 and Zoo potential. Cool. Cerebro 2 and potential can have him drop as a 4, 6, or 7 power card. And if that happens, then he's good. And if not, then he's at least easy to play. I think Cerebro 2 is likely to be the best home. I don't think Zoo is a good home. I think the Zoos that run M'Baku are not good, but M'Baku is at least decent in this list. Is there another one you'd like to run? I mean, I guess you can run Yondu, right, for example. So I guess it's doable. I think this is probably a pretty damn good home for the card. We also have an Agatha Zoo. This is the highest win rate Agatha deck in the game right now, and it already runs M'Baku just as because like if you drop Kazara Blue Marvel, that 1/3, 1/4 dropping in, you are more likely to draw the card with Agatha, but like whatever. If you're running Agatha, feel free to have some M'Baku fun in the process. This one doesn't super matter. Next up we have Leech, who's now an on reveal that gets rid of all on reveal cards in your opponent's hand. So he's annoying again when he's ramped into, which means you can play him on turn 4 or earlier if shenanigans happen. He probably messes up Hella Discard and a few other decks pretty damn well. He definitely still has his auto wins, where he's just going to be like you can snap and win on him. He's worse, but maybe enough more versatile. But like High Evolutionary wasn't using him for everything. High Evolutionary was using him to be like, you can't Shang-Chi me, and you can't, or Eliath me, and you can't change locations on me, so my limbo's going to go off. He still does that in exactly this deck. The Hope Evo deck is still perfectly fine. This deck doesn't lose a lot by Leech, and you can still, because you have Wasp, Leech on turn 4, which is pretty freaking good. You can do it on turn 5 after that magic, or you can do it on turn 4. Hell, you can even do it now on turn 6 if you really had to. He's no longer a dead card there in a 7-turn game. So there's a lot of upside to this Leech change, even if it is a worse card. It does get some power back by being an on-reveal. I threw Leech into the Old Hope Thanos. I think this is not as good. I think this is not where you want to be with the card, but I decided a Psylocke shell, it was worth a try. It probably would be a Lockjaw shell if it were going to be good, but that's where we are with Leech right now. Maybe in a Lockjaw shell, otherwise, probably not. I think I'm going to actually try him in a Lockjaw shell just to get going. Finally, we have Mantis, who's going to draw a card from your opponent. Make a copy of the card your opponent played in the same location as her that turn, which makes her, I guess, slightly better. She's only copying 1 card. She can steal a really good card mid to late game with some modifiers on it, like a Venom or a Blob. But like you got to put her in the deck for that, and all the time she's useless. Is that worth it? Does she work with Daredevil? Maybe on turn 5 you can play like a Gladiator or a Treat Mockingbird and her, and you can get your opponent's best thing for turn 6 with maybe like a Quinjet, but that seems like a lot of work to make her work. This was the best I could do. It's a Guardians list. It's based off an old Combat Snap Guardians list that just says, okay, so once in a while, remember she's a 2/2, I'm just going to steal a card. She's sort of hilarious after Storm now, right? If you Storm and then you play her and Mantis there, Mantis and Star-Lord there, you're going to get their best card and the 5 power from Star-Lord, which is a 7 power location, which ain't nothing. 9 power with Storm, which is not terrible, right? She's probably decent with Jean if they're playing important things on Jean. You get to steal those with Mantis. All these things give her just enough use that I think she's interesting, if not good, as the train decides to pass by, excuse me. All right, that's our patch. I hope you liked it. Certain tiers of our Patreon support come with on-air thanks. We've got Abigail Gisela, Mandatory Burnout, Cables, David G. Wingfield, Direwolf, LAB, Father Newman, Good Dog Gamer, Inc., Jay Nevery, Jaden McDonaldino, Akila Platano, Caretix Lee, Koire, KCH, Doku, Philip Brakovich, Haplo, Kenny Loggins, Rob Silverman, Robert River, The Bizza, Jay Bussy, X-Force V, Skippy G, Tommy Nyquist, Black Dahlia, The Great Kazoo, Jessica Gamble, Models, Louis Antunes, Matt Conduit, Matt H, Mikey Hijinks, No Flex, Ocularis, Pretty Chill, Seamus, Spike Jones, Two Ties, The Pirate King Tucker, The Homie Min, and of course Gunny T. All right, my final thoughts are I think this patch will shake things up. I think there's enough weird stuff going on here. I think Thanos is like, once the dust settles, this isn't going to be enough. But for the time being, there's enough different stuff and interesting stuff to make the game more interesting. I'm really, really, really happy with the quality of life changes. Things like undo turn and discard and destroy lists and choosing borders are really great. So I'm very, very positive on this overall, even if it's not doing everything I wanted. These are all steps in the right direction. And remember, as people complain, because people always do, that better is better than worse, and things now are better than they were a few minutes ago. Thanks so much for watching. Hit that sub button, hit that like, hit that comment. We'll be back tomorrow with another Snap Take, custom cards, and a bajillion other things, so make sure you don't miss it. Peace.